Hello, everyone. So I guess, well, oh, hi. Mr. Bill Hirsh. Oh my God. Hi, mijo. I cannot hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Great. Unmuted. Thank you.
Everything looks great.
So I first of all wanted to apologize. Unfortunately, I have this bad sty in my eye, which I have to use a hot compress for. So I look a little bit like I have a black eye right now. There's nothing you or your makeup team could do to address this situation. So just know that that's as far open as I can make my eye at this time. And I am really looking forward to this conversation with you. I so appreciate you and the work that you do, and am happy to be a part of this dialogue. So
are you feeling, I mean, I hope you can stay here, but are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, to let you know first is, I don't know you put some makeup or not or whatever, but I mean, I guess you can see it, but only you really look at it. And I'm sure some people may ask you what happened. So you can make up a whole amazing story or really tell the truth. So anyway, usually I like to start about 5 minutes after. I just like to check, you know, sound and everything. I hope I've been doing my homework, and I've been reading a little bit more of what you've been doing and things in your life. So anyway, just that. I'm feeling a little bit better myself, not completely fine. You know, from the epidural.
From the what?
I got an epidural.
Oh.
And it has been already almost a week. And I don't know if I will recommend it to someone, especially you're sensitive to drugs and things like that. I couldn't move for almost like 4 days. I was just like, so just that, mijo. So yeah, just you know, let's just I'm gonna start just letting people in when the moment starts, and just again about 5 minutes. I usually, for a Latino, I don't like to start things late. You know that we're famous to start an hour later than everything we do. And even when I have performances, when I've been singing and they are like, no, wait, let's keep waiting. It's like, no. So I'm gonna introduce you to my mother. Well, you met her before, so I don't have to introduce you to her.
I met her. You've had her here a couple times. I met her.
Yeah, so it's up to every person, of course, if they want to be shown. But hello, Steven. So the people start to just getting here little by little. And hello, everyone. Hello, Benjamin. Hola, Mama. Hello, Steven. Salud. So how's your day going?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
My day is going well. It's always fun. I enjoy the diversity of things that I get to work on in this office.
Okay. So if you want to, while we do that, Hispanic Heritage Month. Voz de la guitarra mía, al despertar la mañana, quiere cantar su alegría a la Steven, a mi tierra mexicana.
You must be in production somewhere, Capacity. I'm sorry, I just have to finish my soup. Thank you.
México lindo y querido, muero lejos de ti, me digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí, que digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti. For who doesn't know, this is Jorge Negrete, one of the best singers that we ever had in Mexico, one of the classical voices in our music. Celebrating Hispanic, Latinx, Latino Heritage Month. Al pie de los magueyales, esta tierra que es una de hombres cabales, voz de la guitarra al despertar la mañana, quiere cantar su alegría a mi tierra mexicana. Lindo y querido. Welcome everyone, little by little. We are getting together right here. Hello Isabel. Estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí. México lindo y querido, si muero. Hispanic Heritage Month, Latinx, Latinos, everywhere. Ah, have you ever heard this singer, Mr. Bill Hirsh? This was one of the singers that he was trained to be a tenor in opera, and he decided to go in the mariachi route. So we're just gonna wait a few more minutes and we will start our conversation with Mr. Bill Hirsh. And this will be recorded also for future sharings and for future conversations. So I hope you guys can start also working out about your questions, and let me just also How are you, Stephen?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, a little bit better. So just very excited about this conversation. I don't know you knew Bill before, but
no, I haven't because I'm on the East Coast. But I did a little look into the web, the website, and all the work you're doing. We have something similar over here, I think. I know we have Lambda Legal I can go to. Anyway, I just want to applaud you on these series that you're putting together. All the weekly, however you're doing it, what you're doing, it's just keep going, and more power to you. Thank you.
Yeah, little by little, because like trying to see what how can we help a little bit more in the community and stuff. So just breathing a little bit. It seems like today is the first day that we have a little bit of cooler weather in San Francisco. I guess even if yesterday was the official day for our autumn, it felt like summer yesterday, but today it really felt a little bit cooler. Bill, you think you prefer to wait a little bit more? It will be okay to just start little by little the conversation with you? Would that be okay?
Sure, of course. Jesus, I want to start first by acknowledging you and thanking you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the work of the AIDS Legal Referral Panel and the services that we provide the community. It is a pleasure to work with you as a community activist who has worked tirelessly to address the healthcare needs of long-term survivors. So I want to say that I appreciate our partnership, and I am happy to point to some successes as a result of our coordinated efforts and can talk more about those. I also wanted to say that I see some friendly faces, at least in the chat. And again, I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about ALRP.
Yeah, and yeah, let's just simply just start the conversation. I don't want to make you blush or get anything like that, but one of the things that I had always noticed with you, because we have been in so many meetings of so many kinds for so many years in one way or another. First, you know, I think we should always recognize the people that had been doing things before us. And sometimes people in the community, sometimes they think they are the first one, that they're creating something or doing something. And there's so many people that had been fighting for the rights of people with HIV and AIDS and long-term survivors. I remember reading this article that it says that after 5 years only, they were considering already themselves 5-year survivors. But what I have noticed with you always when I'm in these meetings, first, that you're a very smart guy, no doubt. And that's will be the first reason that I always respect when you express yourself about something. But also you're a very kind person. I was just telling someone today that, you know, how long have you been working, or how you connected with HIV/AIDS by now, Bill?
Well, I've been the director at ALRP since March of 2000, but my connection with ALRP goes back to the days when I was a recent law school graduate and was trained by ALRP as a volunteer. And I can talk more about that if you wish.
Yeah. I'm super interested about that, because in some way, I mean, first I want to acknowledge also, because you guys had made a huge difference in my life. Not only in housing issues, but in immigration issues. And my mother is here present to acknowledge, you know, really one of the things that you guys have done. So let's kind of travel a little bit on history. It was 1985 approximately when I was told that I was HIV positive. Where was Mr. Billy Hirsh approximately those days in the 80s?
So I moved out to San Francisco in 1983 to go to law school. I have a law school buddy on the Zoom with us currently, I believe. And when I arrived in San Francisco, it was a scary, scary time. It is hard to describe for people how much AIDS colored the existence of people who are gay in San Francisco during that time, but it was pervasive. The fear, the ignorance, the discrimination that was experienced in the early days of the epidemic was monumental. And I was in law school struggling to find a way to use my legal skills to fight for social justice. And that journey took me to get experiences in immigration law, in employment law, in landlord-tenant law. And when I got out of law school, I was very fortunate to get trained by the AIDS Legal Referral Panel to provide emergency wills for people who were dying very quickly. It's important to remember that in the earliest days, there was no effective treatment for folks living with HIV. Many of the clients that would come to ALRP for assistance were very seriously ill, would need an emergency will. in the hopes that their final wishes would be respected. So a lot of what this group of volunteer attorneys did in the early days was to handle those requests for assistance and draft emergency wills. Probably about 85% of what we were doing back then was emergency wills. And I will just share that like many other organizations in San Francisco and in other places around the country, there was a community response to address the needs of people living with HIV and AIDS. In San Francisco, we talk about the San Francisco model of care, and really San Francisco has led and continues to lead the world in how to respond to the AIDS epidemic. I would suggest we also continue to lead the world in how to respond to the current pandemic. But ALRP was started by a handful of gay attorneys who created a list of other attorneys who were willing to do these emergency wills. Over time, that list grew, and then eventually we got some funding for a staff person. Eventually, we got more funding to hire staff attorneys. The list continued to grow. And as the legal needs of our clients evolved over time, we were able to respond and to provide access to attorneys to assist in a much broader array of civil legal matters.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, remember that you can start writing your questions on the chat and whatever we can do to try to respond. Of course, otherwise we will try to refer you in some way to a future conversation. Bill, I want to take it even a little bit deeper. If we can say that you say you moved here to San Francisco in the 80s. What did you remember seeing or hearing in between your friends when everything started? You know, your own personal take of what started to happen in the community, because something that still many people don't talk about is the historical trauma that this event really happened to really put like almost like a mark in our communities. What do you remember when you moved here?
Well, I remember the aura of ignorance and fear that surrounded our community, and it felt at times like we were at war. And when I say that, I mean that there were so many forces acting against us, and we had to respond to so many horrible public policy initiatives, and at the same time be expected to care for people who were dying, and at the same time deal with whatever health challenges we were facing. So this is a time when there was not one, but two efforts to quarantine people living with HIV. You mentioned immigration law, and I want to give a little tribute to my colleague, Pat Dunn, who recently passed away. Pat, who I went to law school with, started the Immigrant HIV Assistance Project to assist immigrants living with HIV. And it's important to remember that back then, gay people were excludable from the US, as were all people living with HIV. We used to assist people with waivers so that people who were living with HIV could get a waiver and come into the US. But there were so many things that were operating against us. It's hard to overestimate the challenges that we faced.
I'm going to tell you something, and about that. I've been starting to tell really my real story, because for a while I was not able to say it. You know, I came here again in 1985 to USA. I mean, 1984, and in 1985, for just matter of the universe, my angels, whatever, I went to this study, and it ended up that I was HIV positive, but I have no papers. So I wish I had you those days, because I had to lie and I have to do what I have to do to survive and to stay in this country. I really believe I will be dead if I was not here, if I didn't stay here. So that's another reason that I really applaud a lot of what you guys do, because sometimes you have to fight even against laws to help people. I don't know if I'm wrong, but I read that it was until 2010 that finally the government was accepting people with HIV in this country, or am I wrong about that?
I think that sounds about right. But there were people who we could get waivers for. So even before then, before the law was officially changed, there was a mechanism within the law where we could apply for some exceptions to the law. And that work had been going on for some period of time. There's also been work over many years to assist people living with HIV and who are LGBT to apply for political asylum. And that has been transformative for the folks that we have secured that remedy for, but that is very hard to do. It takes a lot of work for an individual to show that they are facing persecution in their country of origin. But there are many attorneys who have taken up that challenge over the years. Just last week, we secured political asylum for an individual from Brazil. And while we might think that conditions in the world have improved for people living with HIV and for people who identify as LGBT, the reality is that for many folks, they face terrible persecution. And it is really attorneys who are stepping up to the plate at ALRP as volunteers, but in other organizations, attorneys who fight on behalf of the rights of immigrants are doing amazing work.
Yeah, and I wanted to in some way connect that a little bit. And I know that sometimes we're going to be jumping through history back and forth, but I keep telling people that that's one of the things that can happen right now. An immigrant comes to this country, suddenly gets very sick of COVID-19 in this moment, or even is still HIV. And what will it happen, to that person if that person is, returned to his home or her home? And honestly, again, once again, comparing with my own history, I cannot say that I was persecuted. I just knew that if I was going back to Mexico without even my family, in those days, there was no medicine. In here, we were just beginning to come out with something. Mexico, it was really zero. And again, I had to lie in physical even aspects about that. So let's just say a person arrives, and we're gonna take different issues. A person arrives from another country and he gets sick. It doesn't matter what the issue is gonna be, HIV, COVID-19. What are the legal possibilities of this person to really stay in this country if he's really delicate, or if that person knows, if I go back to Africa or Brazil or any other country, I might not have those medicines to survive. What are the possibilities, or which way a person can at least approach this problem of life and death?
So that's a really tough question, and it involves a nuanced answer, and probably more than we can get into right now. But if the individual does not have documentation and is not here lawfully, there are not many great options for them to avoid having to be returned to their country of origin. It would really depend upon what the facts were for the individual. There might be a way for somebody to legalize their status based on a family member or a spouse there might be an opportunity for an individual to apply for political asylum, but that would have to be on the basis of persecution on one's membership in a particular group. So when we talk about group, we could talk about people who identify as LGBT. We could also identify people who are living with HIV. I do not think that there has been any law on whether membership in a group of somebody who has tested positive for COVID is going to meet the terms of the law. If somebody is in a defensive posture, so if some law enforcement has taken somebody in, there may be some extraordinary measures to suspend deportation, but those are extremely difficult cases to win. So in the absence of a legal path for getting legal status, there are sometimes very few options for people who are here without documentation.
Yeah, and I want to remind also the people listening to us and the people that they're going to be listening to this recording that please don't give up because if we give up, sometimes we definitely let ourselves go and die. I'm going to put another huge compliment to what ALRP does. It's not just about law. And I'm going to mention a name, Mr. Dimitri, that I adore because he was my lawyer for a long time. One of the things that he made me feel through the whole process of me fighting in this particular case, housing issues, he made me feel safe. I think many of us, when we are under stigma, discrimination, or simply being in risk of losing our home or jobs or thrown out of this country or something, is that constant feelings of feeling not safe, and it really affects our health. And I don't know how you guys manage or how do you guys talk about this matter. But, you know, honestly, for me, one of the things that he made me feel and taught me about is how to do little things to feel that way, safe. What would you say just about this issue that you may not even think about it, but when you do so much for a community, you are making us feel safe? Anything that you want to say about that, but whatever happened between you guys, us lawyers, or conversations or something, any little thing that you want to add to it?
Well, I'll say a couple things. First of all, in my work, I am privileged to call as colleagues many folks, people who have served as staff attorneys with ALRP, people who volunteer on ALRP's panel and provide their services for free or on a sliding scale for our clients. I often hear from our volunteers how the work that they do for ALRP clients is amongst the most meaningful work that they take on. So it has been a privilege for me to work with so many wonderful individuals over these many years. And Dimitri, who now works as an immigration attorney, is certainly one of my faves over these years. So I share your admiration for Dimitri. I will shift for a moment to housing, since you raised that as an issue. And I have worked on affordable housing issues for most of my professional career, and indeed, I would assert that there is no issue of greater importance for people living with HIV than stable, affordable housing. And that is why at ALRP, we work so zealously to keep people living with HIV safe and housed. So I can talk a little bit more about the housing needs of people living with HIV and the work that still needs to be done. but I will follow your lead, sir.
No. I think let's go with the flow. Why don't you tell us a little bit about housing? That definitely it is a huge thing. And there is a question comment on the chat, but I will follow through after we talk a little bit about housing. What can you tell us about that connection between housing? This year is the 40th year of the official first cases of HIV/AIDS. And sadly, still stigma and discrimination still happens like if it was 1980s. What can you tell us about housing and this HIV connection and discrimination?
I can tell you that housing is the essential ingredient for health. We, in the HIV community, we talk about viral suppression, which means that you can have your HIV disease essentially neutralized such that your health is solid and you are unlikely to transmit the virus to others. And Jesus can certainly fine-tune that message, but that's the basic concept around viral suppression. In folks who are in care and receiving treatment and who are stably housed, about 75% of them are what we call virally suppressed. For people who are not stably housed, only 20% of those folks are virally suppressed. So it is truly the single most important factor in looking at all realms of disparities in healthcare access for people living with HIV. It is more dispositive of the outcome than gender, than race, ethnicity. There is no factor that is more important than one's housing status. I would suggest that to the extent that we continue to see deaths among people living with HIV, and we continue to see transmissions of HIV to new individuals, it is because people are unstably housed. In San Francisco, there are about 2,500 people living with HIV who are unstably housed. And that's not just according to Bill Hirsh, that's according to the city's AIDS housing plan. So there are huge unmet needs to address the housing needs of people living with HIV. It is one of the reasons we fight so zealously to keep people in the current housing that they have, but it is also a reason why I fight year after year after year to increase other housing resources for people living with HIV, whether that is in the form of additional housing subsidies so that people who have extremely low incomes can afford their rent in San Francisco, or whether that is working with affordable housing providers to develop new affordable housing for this population and address the fair housing rights of people living with HIV, where we can see instances of discrimination. It is often in the realm of housing, but it is often based on disability discrimination, and we can provide assistance to our clients in that realm. I did see something in the chat about mental illness, and I would say that that is a really important point. Increasingly, the folks that we are serving are not only living with HIV, but they are living with other serious health challenges, including serious mental illness and active substance use disorders. Yeah. In San Francisco, Jesus, you are aware of the Getting to Zero effort, which is a broad-based public policy effort to get the community to zero new HIV infections, zero HIV-related deaths, and perhaps even more ambitiously, zero HIV-related stigma. In order to advance any of those goals, we have to address 3 big ticket items. And those big ticket items are housing, mental health, and substance use. Before I pass it back to you, Jesus, I will share one statistic which has stuck in my head and has not escaped for several years, which given my advanced age is pretty good. There was a hearing at the Board of Supervisors about 2 years ago, pre-COVID, that was looking at the rate of people who are discharged from residential treatment programs to the streets in San Francisco. The statistic was 40% of people who complete a residential treatment program are discharged to the streets. So we take these people who are incredibly vulnerable, who have very complex healthcare challenges, we get them into housing, we get them into treatment, we work with them for some period of time, whether that's 6 months or a year or 18 months. And then at the end of that, we literally dump them on the streets of San Francisco. For me, that is unconscionable. The city spends thousands and thousands of dollars to stabilize the health of these people. And when they are left on the streets, we know what will happen. We know that they will not be able to access the healthcare that they need in order to stay healthy. I would suggest that we should have a system that actually incentivizes folks to get into treatment, such that at the end of that residential treatment, you are guaranteed access to safe, affordable housing.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. And one of the things that I was part of my community of HIV long-term survivors, that somehow many people don't want to mention the word HIV long-term survivors because it is complicated and you have to define it and et cetera, et cetera. But coming from my community, Bill, no doubt that we need a lot of help in the mental health area. Many times, and Stephen is always one of the advocates right here that also always fighting for mental health. In a simple conversation with many of my people, if you want to call it, or our people, it is very obvious sometimes that need. I don't know what comes first, like they say, eat the egg or the chicken. But when we try sometimes to do one thing, if it's just housing, or if it's just mental health, or if it's just social work, or if it's just harm reduction, it doesn't work. Like you say, if you throw one, then the next portion, the person is abandoned and we don't know what to do. So definitely agree about that. I just also feel that it has to be, and it takes a lot of money, of course, and a lot of people to really deal with these issues, but it has to be together. Otherwise, when you're working in one, you're missing the other one, and then you're missing the other one, and we keep doing that. So
there is a mode of housing that we call supportive housing. And it is the idea that for some populations, they need more than affordable housing in order to stay housed. So this would be housing that would contemplate some level of services available to assist individuals, whether that's mental health services, whether those are substance use services, there may be physical healthcare services available as well. But it is important to remember that the biggest challenge is around affordability, because for many of the folks that we work with, they are living on disability. And if they're fortunate to receive supplemental security income, also known as SSI, their income is about $900 a month. A single room occupancy hotel in San Francisco is over $1,200 a month. So there's literally no way for people who have incomes at that level to be able to afford housing, but for a subsidy. The private market is never going to develop housing that is affordable to the folks at the very lowest income levels.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with every part of it. I guess it's also a reminder that after so many of us pass through racism, homophobia, discrimination, stigma, so many closets out and everything. Uh, I always call it just with the fact of growing older with dignity. It is, of course, having a place, but not just a little closet, because I have friends, and I'm talking really openly to you about what happened when they were trying to do some kind of housing really close by right here, that the apartments were so tiny. Like even in the case with my mother, and I'm gonna make it personal, they want us to live, both of us, in a little tiny room. And we know that San Francisco is a huge problem and market, but it's also for me, and I have more than a few friends that they couldn't move to these places because they were so like almost like tiny little things. Uh, yes, Stephen. I was just answering something. Okay, I'm gonna pass you something else, Bill. And I just want to just take your take on it. It is the year 2021. And again, stigma and discrimination is still present, is still happening. It is the only disease that when you go to a dating website, they still ask you, will you date an HIV positive person? I had always been really curious to know if, especially now with you equal you, that of course, I hope everybody here listening to us knows what you equal you means, and detectable means transmissible. Yes, and I see the faces saying, of course we know. But but of course also the rest of the world needs to know, is there something that we can do, that we can fight? And I was talking to you even just briefly about about advanced care directives, how to be feeling more inclusive. Why is it, and is it legal still, what can we do about to these companies that still ask, would you date an HIV positive person?
So I don't think that there is anything illegal about asking the question that you posed. So we have a ways to go still in addressing stigma, but unless there is an issue of somebody being denied some public accommodation or some housing because of their HIV status, I don't think that there is an action around that on a dating app.
Interesting. And I mean, I think that's like at the most, of course, we're talking about needs, housing, we're talking about immigration, we're talking about many other things, but the most basic need that many of us still growing older for the first time with HIV, like many of you here, hey, growing older and still want to feel loved and accepted. But it is an accepted question and not any other issues, in regards to that. But anyway, I guess it is good to know that legally it is what it is in some way. So let's go back a little bit to ALRP. You mentioned a little bit of how ALRP started about advanced care directives and trying to help people. Do that issue is still, if somebody is dying and without a paper, especially you're part of the LGBTQ community or not married, because you can just not have a legal partner, do that issue still happens a lot if you don't have an advanced care directive?
Yes, I think many people are reluctant to reflect on their lives and to put into place estate planning documents. I know many people who want to put off those kinds of decisions. Unfortunately, we still see the need for emergency wills, and we still see some terrible consequences unfold when folks don't have those estate planning documents in place. Certainly, if there is legal recognition for somebody's relationship, whether as a domestic partner or as a spouse, then there will be some protections that are afforded that relationship, but that in and of itself is not going to ensure that somebody's final wishes are respected. And I will say that the most egregious instances we see are where there are people who are transgender and they are living their life in the gender that they identify with, and their estate planning documents are not in place. Their birth family may swoop in and they may no longer respect the way that an individual has lived their life. And it is not so hard to do to put these estate planning documents in place. ALRP still provides assistance with that. We still have attorneys who provide that service. We have notaries who can notarize those documents, and you can save your family a great deal of time and trouble by ensuring that you have those documents in place. I would encourage everybody who is listening this afternoon to make that decision and to move forward with getting those documents in place as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's super important, guys. Please do pass this message to people, because it is super important. We've been fighting for our rights like all our life, and then to end up at certain moment really ready to die without making it melodramatic is going to happen. And if we don't have those papers, and to even in the case, like Bill says, in the case of transgender people, to even go back to not even acknowledging what you want to be acknowledged for, guys, let's do it. So ALRP in our present, what are the major issues that you guys been working lately? Do COVID-19 has changed anything on the picture? You know, are you including like, and I was thinking about what Stephen was saying, you know, are you including also other health issues in between? What is going on with the ALRP right now in 2021?
So, unlike some other organizations that have shifted their mission over time to expand their service provision to other populations, ALRP continues to be focused in its service provision on people who are living with HIV and AIDS. We serve folks in 7 counties around the Bay. We do not have income restrictions in order to access our services. So all someone has to do is to be living with HIV and AIDS and living in one of the 7 counties that we serve. That said, many of our clients do experience other health challenges, and ALRP has a great deal of experience working with folks with some of those other health challenges as well. ALRP now has 13 attorneys on staff, in addition to several hundred attorneys on its volunteer panel. So ALRP is somewhat unique amongst legal services providers because we have access to this panel of volunteers who can assist people with issues like immigration, like employment, like estate planning, like credit and bankruptcy, which are sometimes not available in a more traditional legal aid organization. The biggest areas of need for our clients fall in the categories of housing, which now represents fully 1/3 of our caseload. And we have 6 attorneys who are focused on everything from eviction defense to unlawful rent increases to habitability issues to fair housing and discrimination issues, and assistance with some of the subsidy programs that our clients interface with in order to stay housed. The other areas would be immigration and insurance. So we can assist people with a pretty broad array of immigration issues, everything from securing political asylum, but we also help people adjust their status to lawful permanent residency and even to naturalize and become US citizens. With insurance, we can assist people who are facing denials from their private long-term disability insurer. And we can also help with some post-entitlement issues. So after somebody has gotten onto SSI or SSDI, there are plenty of things that can go awry with that process, and ALRP can assist with those issues as well.
Thank you, Bill. How can we help ALRP? I know that you guys also have volunteers, of course. I've been lucky to be in some of, before COVID-19, in some of your amazing events. And I want to start over, also open the lines to whoever has a question or whoever wants to really ask you something, as much as we can, of course, answer those questions. So please just let me know, put your hand up, or let me know in the chat, and I will gladly either pass the question or I can just open the line. But I understand, of course, are you still guys looking for volunteers for events? You know, and how can people get connected to
So first of all, let me say that during COVID, we have transitioned to support our staff working remotely. It is less than ideal, but folks can access our services by leaving a message on our client line, or folks are welcome to email me directly at bill@alrp.org, and I will get folks connected to a staff person to conduct an intake interview. I fear that for many service providers, not being in the office, not allowing folks to come in to drop in for services is very problematic. And I think that we are all looking forward to a time where we can return to the office safely and serve our clients in person. You are doing a great service to ALRP this afternoon by helping us to get the word out about ALRP services so that folks know about us and can find us and can access our services appropriately. So thank you for helping us to get the word out. We try and have a rather robust outreach effort, but that of course has been hindered because of the current pandemic. We do utilize volunteers. First of all, there are the wonderful volunteer attorneys who serve on our panel. There are the wonderful volunteers who serve on ALRP's board of directors. We have volunteers who come into our office and help us with some clerical tasks. And then you have generously volunteered as an event volunteer for ALRP. And when there are community events where ALRP is required as part of its contract with those organizations to provide volunteers, we do need volunteers, whether that's for the Folsom Street Fair or the Castro Street Fair or any other of those wonderful community events that help to raise funds for community-based organizations. Some of them are starting to happen in person again.
Yeah.
I was at the Folsom Street Fair volunteering the other day. I was at the Castro Street Fair the other day, accepting a check from the wonderful folks at Cheer SF who generously raise funds for community-based organizations. So it's nice to see that folks are starting to get out and about again, and we're always appreciative of volunteers who are willing to help us out.
Yeah, and again, well, people really, again, have any questions or things like that, I kind of wanted to, how would I not end this conversation, because we're going to keep talking always, I hope, in many different ways. I want to connect a little bit of your past with the present. Had you had people in your life leaving you because of HIV AIDS, and we do have someone that we love to talk. Hold on one second. Stephen is all yours, but I would love to hear that a little bit of you, and then we can get Mr. Stephen Pivello to ask you that. Is there something that you want to say about that?
About whether I've lost people to HIV? I think every gay man who has lived in San Francisco has lost friends to this terrible epidemic. I had the fortune of knowing a great man who I would say served in some way as a spiritual guide for me in the 80s, and he died in the early 90s. I was privileged to be part of the small group of friends who helped to sustain him at home and to make that transition go as smoothly and painlessly as possible. But I have a deep, abiding love for that man. That time only serves to remind me of why I do this work. I just simply have to flash on him, and I return to that passion that has sustained me. I can recall vividly the day where I was working in the Tenderloin in my first job after law school, where my supervisor, who was a gay man who had served as a minister in a previous position, came to me and pointed to a purple lesion on his neck and asked me what I thought that was. And I encouraged him to go to the doctor, and he was able to maintain his work for the next several years, but he ultimately died of AIDS as well. He was a man who served as a mentor to me professionally, and his compassion has always served as a model for me in the work that I do. Those are two instances that come to mind very quickly because I was so intimately involved with their care. But everyone who has lived in San Francisco over time knows people who are living with HIV. Many of us have lost friends and partners and family members. I think that one of the things I find special about San Francisco, even with all of the changes that the city faces, is the incredible level of compassion that we see in this city. It is the compassion that has sustained that community response to meeting the needs of people living with HIV. It's the compassion that has sustained our response during the current pandemic. I always say that in San Francisco, we have a healthy combination of an appreciation for science and a compassion for our fellow community members. And that's what I think makes San Francisco so special, in addition to nature.
No, and thank you. I always, I guess, like to make that connection a little bit more. But again, it's not just San Francisco. Of course, we have this beautiful man, Mr. Stephen, has a question for you.
Sure.
So go for it, Stephen.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jesus. I just wanted, you talked about the housing, the substance abuse. I am in housing, thank God. Public housing. I'm on SSDI. I am recovering heroin meth addict. You know, just I've lived it, and I'm bipolar. And so the other element is I'm aging, and you know I have all that, the SNT, all that in place. But I'm so fearful that who's going to come and help me at home when I get hurt? And you know, I know because I have family that's in the medical profession, you know, that she's like, you know, Stephen, HIV is around a long time. You know, don't feel like they're going to, you know, treat you wrong. But you know, it's an angst I'm sure that everyone has. And on that note, I wanted to just toss this out, and if it makes sense, pass it on somehow. I think we need to merge the youth in the community to the elderly, and possibly do it on an incentive, like you said, where we're giving them, paying for their college education, and what they're giving in return is they're giving a home health care, like a volunteer, you know, X amount of years, and get that going in the community. I'm just a one man, you know, guy who's telling a story on a website, but you know, I just brainstorming that. I've written it down. If you guys can make it work, please do. I got to run. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you, Mijo. Love you.
Love you.
Anything that you want to say about that area, Stephen?
I will just say that depending upon the level of disability that someone has and their income, there may be programs that are available to provide in-home support. In California, there is one system in place. Other states might have comparable schemes, but that is something that I would certainly encourage folks to consult with a social worker that they may be working with their healthcare provider who could connect them to those services.
Yeah, I want to, and I because I know you guys gonna be working, and I respect you so much in these legal areas. It has been a huge problem, and we're almost ready to leave also, at least this conversation for now. But it has been a huge issue to really intertwine the HIV service and the senior services. Our amazing Marcy Adelman, that she's constantly writing about these issues of LGBTQ elders and HIV community growing older. Many members of our community, we still don't know where are we going now that we are part of the first generations growing older with HIV. And we do encounter a lot of stigma and discrimination when we approach these senior services. And not only this, but lately even Marcy passed an article about how much abuse is happening in our LGBTQ elders or people with HIV, and many of these senior services. We are getting older. I'm 61 years old. It sounds almost funny to say that number, but are you guys ready to keep going with the fight for our elders now that these things are happening? I mean, they're real. And how can we help? How can I help you? How can really we intertwine these services in a way that has less stigma and discrimination? Because there were even some articles about that some people were going back to the closet. How can we do this? And is there some way in policy making or legally or something? How can we help? And I know that we're almost ready to leave, but and this is almost like another whole conversation.
Yeah, so that is a lengthier conversation. I will say that there have been some great efforts to highlight the needs of long-term survivors and people who are aging with HIV. I think there's additional work that needs to be done to do some of the cross-training that you've identified in terms of service providers who work with seniors and service providers who work with people living with HIV. There's much more that we can do to encourage a conversation between those communities. I think that there are still budget battles to be waged to try and get the additional funding that we need to provide the services for this community. Each year, we fight to maintain the level of services that we have. In some years, we've been able to bring on additional funding for services, and we've been successful in getting some money for housing subsidies for people with HIV, and we've been successful getting some funding for additional mental health services for long-term survivors. So there is still more work to be done, but I can assure you that that is on the radar of the advocates in San Francisco who are working on these issues.
Yeah, so if nobody else has any other questions, because there's always going to be, or nobody has their hand up, I want to really thank you. for accepting this. Again, you guys have made a difference in my life. I will not even have this beautiful apartment that I have right now if it's not because of you guys. And my mom is here with me as an immigrant, as a resident. She needs to start working on her citizenship. Mom, do you hear me? Maybe we can go with that and talk about it. But my mom is here thanks to that. And I know and I hear from so many people all the things that you guys do. So I want to thank you for all those things. And as I mentioned briefly, for making us feel safer, because many of us, again, we still experience stigma and discrimination in so many different ways. And so we need you, Bill, a lot, and all of you guys. So if nobody else has anything else, again, I just want to say thank you all for being with us today. And we will have this recording added to our things that we can share and to promote. And remember many of the things that we've been talking about today, the advanced care directives, how to approach an organization that can help you with legal issues. If you experience any kind of stigma or discrimination, reach out, just don't keep it there. We don't need to go back to another closet. So thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Jesus, for your work in the community and for giving me the opportunity to talk about ALRP today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Margaret,
Bye,
everyone. Love
Bye.
you. Love you guys. Thank you so much.